So we're going to move into next the ABI Research NFC survey results. We have two guests joining us today to present these from ABI, Andrew Zignani and Phil Seeley. It looks like Andrew will be kicking us off, so I will hand it right over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Patty. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Zignani, and I am Research Director for ABI Research's Wireless Connectivity Market Research Service. As part of this role, I'm responsible for our market data and forecasts for and various research reports for technologies like Wi-Fi, like Bluetooth, 82.15.4, ultra-wideband, and of course NFC across many different applications, ranging from smartphones and consumer electronics to smart home, the wearables market, and the IoT as well.
And hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Phil Seeley. I'm a Digital Research Director here at ABI Research. I'm responsible for our smart card and secure IC related content and coverage. As it relates to ABI Research, we have a strong presence in market intelligence and advisory services, very much focused on smart card technologies across both card and embedded formats, across key secure use cases, including payments, government ID, and ticketing. And I've been covering the NFC market and technology for over 10 years now.
Thanks, Phil. So today, Phil and I will be sharing a brief kind of summary of our 2022 NFC survey results, which will provide some guidance, insight, and recommendations around consumer attitudes, experiences, and understanding of NFC and contactless technologies in the post-COVID world. You may remember that we also conducted a similar survey back in 2020, and we hope to share some additional perspective on how the market has evolved over the last couple of years. And we will reference, some of the key changes in results between the different surveys throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. But before going into that, I just want to provide a brief introduction and background into the survey itself and explain how some of the results were achieved and what the aims and ambitions of the survey were. So firstly, the main goal of the survey was to try and build a better understanding of consumer adoption, experiences, and familiarity with contactless and NFC technology at both the global and the regional level. And one thing I want to highlight here is that the survey was intended to capture users of the technology. So the first question asked respondents if they've ever used a contactless payment card or a mobile payment wallet platform. And those who had not used it were either were terminated, from the survey at that point, meaning only users of the technology were included in the results. And this is just worth bearing in mind for some of the later questions throughout the survey. The survey itself captured over 2,600 respondents across 9 different countries, including the US, China, Japan, South Korea, the UK, Spain, France, Germany, and Italy. And one initial key statistic I'd like to mention here is that of all the people surveyed in these countries, on average, 85% of respondents had used some form of contactless technology, while approximately 15% of respondents were terminated. And if you break it down at the country level, in each of the countries surveyed, at least 7 out of 10 people had used contactless technologies, while in some regions such as China, Japan, and South Korea, this increased to 9 out of 10 people. So, very encouraging adoption across the board. We also asked some additional questions on how often they use contactless technology, how long they've been using it for, any issues with the technology, security and safety perceptions around contactless, use cases outside of contactless payments, and as well as how familiar they regarded themselves with NFC technology on the whole. Next slide, please. And just to discuss some of the other major takeaways from the survey, I'll briefly hand over to Phil, who will provide a kind of summary of some of the major key findings and results of this survey.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So before I pass back over to Andrew, who will delve a lot deeper and investigate these areas in a lot more detail, he will provide some supporting facts and figures. We wanted to just provide a quick executive summary outlining some of the key survey findings and takeaways. So I think, firstly, contactless payment card usage continues to exceed that of mobile NFC wallets. And this clearly demonstrates that NFC digital payment applications largely remain a secondary form factor and a companion of the physical card. But having said this, NFC wallet usage has grown considerably when compared to the results of the 2020 survey. Another interesting key takeaway was the fact that the contactless payment card remains the preferred solution over smartphone and/or wearables for that matter. However, this might not come as too much of a surprise, given the fact that the majority of survey respondents have only been using their NFC wallets for less than 2 years. In terms of NFC wallet experience, users continue to report and respond very positively to NFC. However, certain issues do remain, with the key issues reported being that of error messages, speed of response, and multiple attempts to respond. Also, in terms of the security perception, confidence remains high as it relates to contactless technology, whether that be via a card or a mobile form factor. And familiarity with NFC technology was another positive, with only a small percentage of respondents only somewhat familiar with NFC as a technology. And although NFC is predominantly known for its use within payments markets, or within the payments market, it is clear that other use cases beyond payments are becoming more popular, with the top reported use cases outside of payments being used for public transportation and consumer product interaction use cases. And with that said, I'll pass it back over to Andrew, who will present some of our survey findings in greater detail.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Next slide, please. So moving on to the specific survey questions, the first question asked in the survey, was which of the following contactless or mobile payment wallet solutions have you used? With the potential answers including contactless payment cards and the various wallet solutions, including, of course, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and many others. And again, just to reiterate here that the survey was terminated if the respondent hadn't used any of these methods, and respondents could also select more than one option, such as a contactless payment card, as well as Apple Pay. And in terms of the major findings of those respondents who have used contactless technology, there have been some significant increases in those who have used a contactless payment card versus the 2020 survey. Now, 70% of respondents in the 2022 survey have used a contactless payment card, which was versus 54% in 2020, which is a 16% difference, which equates to a 30% increase in adoption. So very positive. Regarding mobile payment wallets, the number of respondents who have used Apple Pay has grown to 63% of respondents in 2022 from 46% in 2020, a difference of 23%. Google Pay has remained somewhat stable, growing to 43% from 42% in 2020. Samsung Pay has also seen a significant increase, growing to 42% of respondents from 31% in 2020. And Huawei Pay has increased also from 12 to 16%, while LG Pay has declined slightly from 10 to 9%. So in summary, as Phil has just touched upon really, contactless payment card usage continues to be higher than that of mobile payment wallets, but contactless card usage has also grown significantly during this time, as well as mobile wallet usage, which has also grown considerably over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. So the second question in the survey asked respondents how often they either use their contactless payment card or mobile payment wallet solution. So at the top level, over 3/4 of respondents use their contactless payment card or mobile payment wallet at least multiple times per week or more, with 1/3 of respondents using it nearly every day. Usage generally increased in 2022 survey compared with 2020. One exception was daily usage, which slightly fell from 16% of respondents to 15%. But this could have been somewhat impacted by people less willing to travel daily due to the pandemic. However, the percentage of respondents who use it nearly every day grew from 28% to 33%, while those using it multiple times per week grew from 32% to 35%. So in summary then, those using their card or payment wallet daily or nearly every day grew from 44% of respondents to 47%, while 99% of respondents used them several times per month or more regularly, which has grown from 94% in 2020. So while the pandemic has obviously accelerated adoption, it appears that end users are also actually using their card and payment wallets on a more regular basis than before. Next slide, please. So new in this year's survey, the third question asked end users to rank their preferred contactless payment solution between contactless payment card, smartphone mobile payment wallet, and smartwatch mobile payment wallet. And as the chart shows, contactless payment card remains the preferred solution when compared to mobile and smartwatch alternatives. 53% of respondents ranked contactless payment cards as their #1 preference, 33% ranked smartphones, and 14% ranked smartwatch as their preferred solution. Next slide, please. So another new question for this year's survey focused on how long these users had been using their contactless mobile payment wallet for. As the chart on the right-hand side shows, that the most common response was less than 2 years, with 44% of respondents, followed by around 30% for less than 3 years, and 18% of respondents for less than 1 year. So what this kind of means is that 6 out of 10 respondents that we surveyed have been using their contactless mobile payment wallet for less than 2 years. And in total, 91% of respondents have been using it for less than 3 years. And this likely, would likely reflect the accelerated adoption of contactless solutions as a result of COVID-19. It's important to bear in mind when we talk about user experiences and familiarity with the technology in the next few slides as well. Next slide, please. Now, a big part of the survey and some of the discussions so far have been on NFC user experiences. And question 7 asked if those using contact technology have ever experienced any issues while using a contactless payment card or mobile payment wallet. And as you can see from the pie chart, 9% of respondents have reported having frequent issues, 16% reported occasional issues, and we also added a new option in the 2022 survey for rarely, of which 37% rarely had an issue. So overall, in a 2020 survey, around 2/3 of respondents, or 66%, had experienced issues while using their contactless solution. However, in the 2022 survey, this dropped to around 61%, showing a slight improvement. Most encouraging, perhaps, those reporting frequent issues fell from 16% of respondents in 2020 to just 9% in 2022. And the number of respondents who've never had an issue increased to 39% from 34% in 2020. In 2020, of course, 50% of respondents reported occasional issues. However, now that we added this extra rarely segmentation in this new 2022 survey, only 16% of respondents reported occasional issues, while the majority of those now went into the kind of rarely bucket, with 37% rarely having an issue. So in summary, then, the results are overall quite encouraging, with 75% of respondents either rarely or never experiencing issues. However, it's still clear that some issues are impacting user satisfaction still, and more needs to be done to improve the overall user experience. Next slide, please. So the next question sought to dive a little bit deeper into this experience question and asking users what the actual issues were that they faced when using making a contactless payment with a mobile payment wallet. And as the chart shows, the main reported issue was multiple attempts to respond, with around 38% of respondents having this. Error message was second with 25% of respondents. Slow to respond was third with 23%. Awkward to use, 18% of respondents. Did not respond, 17% of respondents. Finding where to tap, 13% of respondents. And then the retailer not accepting contactless in just 10% of respondents. So what it shows is that the top 3 issues really show that there's still some potential problems with payments in terms of response times and speed. However, it's not really clear whether the issues reported originate on the front-end device side, whether it's the application, whether it's the kind of back-end contactless reader infrastructure. So a little bit more work needs to be done here to dive deeper into the problems. Retailers not accepting contactless was relatively low down the list, and this is perhaps unsurprising given the pandemic and accelerated rollouts, but it still does remain a problem. But this is likely to, potentially dissipate as contactless rollouts continue over the next few years. So in summary, then, the majority of the issues seem to be, technology or app related, and not necessarily related to, support from retailers and infrastructure rollout. And going forward, there needs to be, arguably more effort in trying to narrow down where these technology or application responsiveness issues and errors are still stemming from. Next slide, please. So one question asked in both surveys tried to gauge user confidence in the safety and security of contactless payment cards and mobile payment wallets. The number of respondents either confident or very confident was quite aligned with the 2020 survey, with more than 2/3 or 71% in 2022 versus 70% in 2020. And while the number of confident respondents increased from 44 to 51%, the number of very confident respondents fell from 25 to 20%. Overall, if we look at the total numbers, 9% of respondents were either not that confident or not confident at all in 2022, which has grown slightly from 6% in 2020. But on the positive note, I think ultimately the vast majority of respondents remain confident, at least at some level, with the security or perceived security that contactless cards and mobile payment wallets provide, with 91% at least somewhat confident in the safety and security of the technology. Next slide, please. So another question we asked in both surveys was how familiar end users consider themselves with NFC technology. Interestingly, familiarity with NFC has increased considerably in the 2022 survey versus the 2020 results. In the 2020 survey, the most common familiarity level was somewhat familiar at 33%. However, in the 2022 survey, the most common familiarity level was familiar, with 42% of respondents selecting familiar, growing from 30% in 2020. And those regarding themselves as very familiar also increased from 19% in 2020 to 25% in 2022 survey. So in summary, whereas in 2020, 82% of respondents were at least somewhat familiar with NFC, in 2022 survey, this increased to 95% of respondents, which is a very significant increase. And this could potentially be explained by much greater exposure to the technology over the last few years, but it's still encouraging nonetheless that familiarity or overall familiarity is increasing. Next slide, please. So the last question I want to focus on today centers around some of the other NFC related use cases. Unsurprisingly, 95% of respondents have used contactless technology for paying for a product. Meanwhile, the top two alternative use cases in both the 2020 and the 2022 surveys were public transportation and consumer product interaction. Public transportation actually remained at a similar level, growing to 48% versus 45% in 2020, so a slight increase. Tapping consumer products like alcohol, clothing, luxury items, consumer goods, this still remained important, with over a third of respondents having leveraged NFC to interact in some manner with these products. However, this fell to 38% in 2022 from 53% in 2020. And I think partially this could be that it's possible that the connected consumer product use case has declined due to an influx of new users who are primarily using it for paying for products and are perhaps less familiar with alternative use cases. So I think it would be interesting to review this in a few years' time to see how other use cases such as wireless charging and secure vehicle and building access may also grow thanks to NFC's new wireless charging features and its use alongside technologies such as ultra wideband for secure entry applications. Next slide, please. So on to the last slide then, and we'd like to provide some final conclusions and outline our future expectations for contactless and NFC technology. Here I'll hand back over to Phil to provide some final insight.
Fantastic, thank you, Andrew. So firstly, I think we'd like to say frequency of use will continue to rise. In terms of contactless card and wallet usage, in 2022, 83% of respondents use the technology daily, nearly every day, or multiple times per week. And this is significantly up from the 76% that was reported in the 2020 survey results. This doesn't really come as much of a surprise. We've seen some significant efforts placed on contactless enablement and migration, of course, driven by COVID. And put simply, more people are now exposed to contactless than they ever were before. The question of payment card or credential issuance approach, whether that be a digital first or physical first approach, remains certainly a market focal point. The market paradigms, I think it's fair to say, are beginning to shift, and although the expectation is that the physical will remain, significant efforts are being placed on digital first approaches, issuing a virtual card to a wallet and then following up with a physical card later on. This is, of course, has been championed by the fintechs, and specifically the neo and the challenger banks, and ABI research expects to see a continuation of this trend, which will ultimately benefit NFC usage and hopefully accelerate wallet adoption. In terms of contactless transaction limits as it relates to payments, of course, they continue to be increased. Well over 100 countries have already increased their contactless transaction limits, and we believe it's paving the way towards limitless contactless transactions in the future. Mobile has a significant role to play here, we believe, particularly from a security standpoint, whereby multi-factor authentication can be leveraged to ease user uncertainty, especially for higher value transactions. And this is a message that should be pushed using MFA, or multi-factor authentication, wallet capabilities to solve a market pain point for those users that are somewhat uncomfortable in using a physical card form factor without a PIN. And this kind of leads nicely on to my next point related to security and the fact that security perception remains extremely strong. Security, of course, remains a topic which needs continual reinforcement. And for this reason, And sorry, for the reasons just mentioned, as it relates to higher contactless transaction limits, an area which will become increasingly more important in our opinion. And the fact that security perception remains strong also demonstrates that there is no distinction, shall we say, between NFC controller and secure element functionality. Despite the fact that credentials are stored on a secure element, the controller and the secure element functionality are viewed by end users as one and the same. Usage of NFC and wallets will continue to increase across transportation use cases. This is a trend that's been going on for a number of years now. The trend towards open loop acceptance continues to gain significant traction. You know, transportation authorities are looking to offer additional payment choice on their respective networks, and open loop is certainly one that they are accelerating in terms of adoption. And although the user experience remains high, respondents did still report the fact that they had faced some issues. And I think it's fair to say that these issues need better quantifying and qualifying, for that matter, to understand if the issues reported originate from the front end device side, the application, or the back end contactless reader infrastructure side. With the main issues reported being multiple attempts to respond, error messages, and slowness to respond, it remains a little unclear where the issues are originating from, and pinpointing these should be made a priority to ensure continued high levels of experience satisfaction. And finally, NFC will continue to be used more widely outside of payments. Ticketing, as I mentioned before, is a clear additional use case. You know, wallet provider strategies are looking to expand use cases, ultimately to improve or increase reliance on their respective wallets. And this is clearly opening up new use cases, in applications such as access control, loyalty, used in maybe stadium events, and of course, identity use cases. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Thanks for listening. Both Andrew and I would like to thank you all for attending and listening to what we had to say.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil and Andrew. Before Patty comes back on, just real quick, I do want to let members know that the entire research work that ABI has done for us is going to be made available to members. It should be on Kavi, hopefully sometime later this week. What's very interesting is that, well, Andrew and Phil know this, is that each one of those slides you see, there's additional slides to those, and there's also segmentation by country, whatever. So if you want to know how one of those particular questions, how respondents, how people responded in, say, someplace like Korea or China, we have a lot of that data as well. So there's a lot of really great information that members can use to help plan their market strategies over the next couple of years. And thanks, Phil and Andrew, always for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us. Thank you.